Let's focus on another league where there has been drama, but maybe not the kind of drama you sit around waiting in anticipation for.
Unless you're a neutral.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah. What, a plague on both your houses?
Yeah.
Well, wait just one moment. One of those houses is Ajax, and Ajax were at the top of the Eredivisie by some margin, 9 points with 5 games to go. How on earth did they manage to throw away a lead like that?
Well, look, I know, like, again, from a neutral perspective, we love a title choke. But what I think is remarkable about this Eredivisie season is that we've kind of had 2 chokes in the same season.
I was going to say, we've had 2 big swings. PSV had one of their own.
Yeah, because PSV were 9 points clear after winning their first 10 games of the season, having won their first 17 games of last season, and it looked like plus ça change, they'd just romp away with the title. And then they started running aground, conceding a lot of goals either side of Christmas, and particularly in the first half of 2025. And I guess like the European manifestation of that was what happened to them against Arsenal. And then Ajax have this 9-point lead, and they managed to let it leak away. I mean, of course, the most remarkable thing was like the penultimate match of the Eredivisie season, where you have the midweeker where Ajax are still a point in front. We talked about it on Game of the Week last week. Ajax are a point in front, and they go to Groningen, and PSV are at home against Heracles. PSV win comfortably, and Ajax are winning at Groningen until the 99th minute. And people will have seen this, I suspect, online, and that's where it goes wrong. And after their game has finished, all the PSV players, and we've seen a lot of players watching games on mobile phones on the pitch this week, which has been very entertaining. They're coming to terms with what the rest of us know, that mobile reception in football stadiums is really terrible. And no matter how much money you've got, nothing's going to change that. And it's funny seeing the players and the fans watching the end of that game against Groningen, the PSV players, and they're just going nuts and celebrating. And yeah, PSV closed it out on the final day. So despite the fact that Ajax won on the final day as well, it wasn't enough, and they couldn't get it back. So obviously, when you lose a 9-point lead with 5 games to go, people will look at the coach and look at the players. Now, I understand that. People will look at Francesco Faraoli and say, you know, he's inexperienced at the elite level, and he's still a young coach, so I accept that to a certain degree. But how much of this, David, is just like the limitations that this current Ajax have?
Yeah, I think it is. It's limitations. I think if you look at the job in the cold light of day and where Ajax have finished, he's done an outstanding job. You take away the circumstances of blowing that lead, absolutely. I understand why people will say it's the biggest bottle possible. But they've performed well beyond expectations in terms of what that squad is. That's one of the worst Ajax squads that's ever been put out.
Yeah.
And when you are at a club like Ajax, and they're kind of like Barcelona in this way, because of your previous greats, because of the people who have been there before, your players, your coaches, there's a certain expectation, a certain demand, not only to win, but to win with style and to win in a particular way. Farioli looked at things and said, there's no way I can replicate that or come close to doing that with this current squad.
With that in mind, has he done the job at Ajax that Erik ten Hag should have done at Manchester United?
I think potentially so. I think he's done something, I think, that a lot of managers don't do, in that he has adapted to the conditions that he has. When we've talked about Farioli in the very early days on this podcast, I'm talking about Sassuolo, when he was in Turkey as well. He's seen as a bit of a madman in terms of the way he played, because he was so attacking, so expansive, the way that they press. They do a lot of press baiting where they want teams to come and try and get the ball off them and then use their gaps down the wide areas. And he was always looking to be very expansive in the way they played. He looked at Ajax and said, look, I know it's in the DNA of the club to play this way, but I can't do it. So I'm going to adapt with what I've got. And he's done a very good job doing that. I don't think enough coaches do it. A lot of coaches will come out and say, I haven't got the players. The fans will come out and say, oh, he hasn't got the players. But come on, you still have to extract something from the players and what you have at your disposal. He's done that. And I don't think anyone could have done a better job with what he has done there. I think they've done really well in the circumstances.
In the circumstances, although he's now resigned at the day after the end of the season, straight after, and he took it quite badly, or emotionally, should I say?
Yeah, you're right, Dotton. After the win over Twente, he was in bits on the pitch. He was in floods of tears. And I think the perception is that it's because they lost the league that they choked. And I think there was a bit of that in there, but I think it's because he knew he was going. And I think if, Sparta Rotterdam had been able to do PSV a favour and stop them from winning on the final day, and Ajax had won the league, Farioli still would have left and still been in tons of tears, because he talked about, he was still quite emotional when he was talking about it the day afterwards. He talked about what an intense experience he had, and he felt like it hadn't been only a year. He felt like it had been much longer, really. And I think so much of that comes down to like the resources that they have available to them at the moment. If we rewind to like that brilliant Ajax side, which is relatively recently, and I think it will feel relatively recently to a lot of our listeners, that nearly got to the Champions League final in 2019. You look at that team and, the players like just trip off the tongue, don't they? De Ligt, De Jong, Ziyech, Neres, like so many of them, just great players. And they're a wonderful side to watch, particularly away from home in the Champions League that season. And built Erik ten Hag's reputation as well. But from there, they should have been able to win the Dutch League 10 years in a row, because they started in the second qualifying round of the Champions League that year, and they got themselves within seconds of the final before Lucas Moura did them over at the Amsterdam Arena. And so they made a ton of money that they weren't budgeting for that season, 80 million maybe, which is an enormous amount by Eredivisie standards. And on top of that, they sell De Ligt and De Jong youth products for pure profit. And so with that amount of money, you should be able to dominate the Eredivisie for so long going forward. No one else should even be able to come close to you. For PSV to even compete with them in the seasons that came, they had to go out into the transfer market and spend a lot of money by Dutch standards. So somewhere along the line, and as always with Ajax, it's a boardroom thing. They have had to drop the ball so spectacularly to get to this point where Farioli is going, yeah, these are the limitations, and these are all I can do. So on one hand, I think as an outsider, it's easy to look at Farioli's Ajax and go, the football is borderline unwatchable. It's the football has not been good this season at all. They've not been entertaining. They've been one of the dullest Ajax sides that I can think of. However, I think given the tradition of the club, I think you have to give enormous credit to Ajax fans. The reaction they've had in the aftermath of Farioli going, we love this guy. He gave so much to our club. He's made us respectable again. And I think it's easy for those fans who are paying fans to turn around and go, this football's terrible, I can't watch this. Especially when you think of all the amazing sides that they've had down the years. But actually, they've said, we were 35 points behind PSV last year, and this guy has made us competitive and got us to the brink of the title. So they have understood what he's trying to do. And I think when we're so obsessed with aesthetics generally, but especially at Ajax, aesthetics are such a big thing. I think it's enormous credit to the fans for understanding that.
It's pretty much exactly the same squad as well. Because again, because the bigger failure at Ajax is not Farioli and giving up that lead. The bigger failure is what Andy just mentioned, and the failure to reinvest smartly in the club and dominate Dutch football for the next 5-10 years, whatever it may be.
Sven Mislintat, bad transfers. I mean, that was a disaster, wasn't it?
Just the type of player that they've brought in as well When we're talking about, no disrespect to my fellow Northerner, when they're bringing in Jordan Henderson, when you're bringing in Weghorst, when you're bringing in this Ajax, this is not Ajax, and the fans realise that and know that as well. So you can't expect Ajax football when this is your calibre and type of player that you have. They want your exciting technical players, even going back more recently as well, when they had players like your Tadic and stuff. That's a type of player that Ajax fans want to see at the club. I don't think they've really got anyone like that or anyone close to it. So Farioli's made use, just extracted the most he can from what he had, and he's done brilliantly. And look, there's a lot of silly clubs around Europe, but there's a lot of smart clubs. They'll have seen that at Farioli, and his stock remains high. If anything, it's gone higher.
But where does his departure leave Ajax then?
Well, I think the interesting thing, Dotton, is one of the favourites for the job is Erik ten Hag. Now, if you're Ten Hag, I have no idea why you take that. If you look at where it starts to go wrong for Ten Hag at Ajax, and the last 6 months are a bit of a mess, and that was never really addressed before he went to Manchester United. The fact that, a little bit like Peter Bosz actually at the start of this year, they've got defensive problems. They start leaking a ton of goals, and they can't really get past that. But part of the reason that it starts going wrong for Ten Hag is what we talked about upstairs. So you've got Mark Overmars, who's the sporting director, who he works with brilliantly and does a great job for him. He leaves. Now, of course, Overmars has to leave because of the way he's behaved, and that's absolutely right that Ajax got rid of him. But all of a sudden, Ten Hag's a little bit lost. Now, I don't know about you, David, but nothing to me about the way that Ajax and Alex Kroos, the sporting director, run at the moment says to me that Ten Hag can just get on with coaching the team. I think that feels like an enormous task to me.
I don't think,
and maybe one better suited to a younger coach.
I think a younger coach. I think one who is happy to work with the conditions that currently are. There's a lot of talk. I've just mentioned him, but there's a lot of talk of Tadic coming back to the club with a view to playing, but then also taking a role upstairs as well. I have seen today, and Andy, I'll love this one. I'm not sure whether you've seen this, but apparently one of the managers that Tadic would like there and has been talking to is Kartal.
Really?
Yes. So that'll be an interesting one, I think, from your knowledge of Turkish football as well.
Sorry, who's that?
Ismail Kartal, who did a really, really good job at Fenerbahce. He got them 99 points last season. Wasn't enough to win the league. Another one who's been mentioned when we talk about the younger coach, Paul Simonis, who won the cup with Go Ahead Eagles this year as well. So I guess when you go backwards and look at coaches that have succeeded at a lower standard, or like a lower level of expectation, I should say, in the Netherlands, you look at when Maurice Stijn went there and it just didn't work at all. And, they're doing okay at Sparta Rotterdam. But that 3-4 months that he was in charge was a bit of a mess. So I wonder if that counts a little bit against Simonis. And they've got a decision to make. There's no doubt about that. And I think especially as football is, and we always say it, football's such a small community. You think that Farioli won't have said to other people, yeah, there's a limit to what you can do there. Whether they win the league or whether they don't win the league on the final day, like I said, he was off. And for a reason. I mean, like you had Alex Kroos, the sporting director, say, oh yeah, we're really disappointed that he's left. But then later in that same interview, he did say, well, the thing is, Francesco wanted to go a bit faster than we were able to go. So even if they get the Champions League money, they're not going to be out there making massive improvements to the squad. That's a massive problem for whoever takes over.
Yeah, and it's just the nature of the league and where they are in the chain, basically, where Eredivisie is. It's along there with Ligue and such, that they'll always be picked off, and also at a point where they can't attract certain type of player.
But who would you pick off from that current Ajax team? I can't think of a lot. Kenneth Taylor, maybe?
I'd have Henderson a year at Sunderland. No,
that is not the correct answer.
No, you're absolutely right. There's no one there, and that's mad to say of Ajax. There's always somebody there at Ajax who you'd say, oh, I'd love to pluck them away. I'd love to bring those in. But by contrast, you could go to PSV and you could go to Feyenoord and say, oh, I'd like him,
Yes.
him. And you
Yes.
can't say that about Ajax right now.
Yeah, that's true.